Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jorge, or you can call me George, whichever suits you better. And together with us tonight is Jason Matthews, designer of the legendary Twilight Struggle and Imperial Struggle and a bunch of other GMT beauties. And an honor to have you here, Jason. These are glorious days for Twilight Struggle, isn't it? I mean, we've got a new edition, and I'm coming right from, the Kythera Convention 2024, and it was an awesome experience. I wished I could see you there, but it would not happen. Anyway, glad to have you here. How are you feeling? These are beautiful days, new edition.
It is exciting, and I'm excited about the new edition, and so happy that people are still interested in exploring the game. It was still GMT's best-selling game last year, so
yeah, awesome.
It's all fantastic. Yeah, and who would have thought 20 years later people would still be talking about it and playing it? Of course, I think Mr. Putin in Russia is helping us with sales, so there's that.
Yeah, I mean, in a few years, maybe you can launch a new version of, post-Cold War or new Cold War. Who knows? Let's hope something like that is not the case anyway.
For sure.
But okay. It's been an amazing 20 years. Yeah, it's a staggering amount of years if you think about that. And I would like to ask you, how do you think the game has evolved throughout the years? I mean, the perception of the community, the numbers of players, the opinions, I mean, even the gameplay or changes in the game. If you could say a few words about the game's evolution throughout the years.
Well, obviously, the gameplay has gotten incredibly sophisticated. And when I first started playing with people competitively and playing online and whatnot, not very many people could beat me because I knew the game. I mean, I just knew it way better than they did. I'd played many hundreds of games. Now people have played thousands of games and they're infinitely better than I am. And so I have no business in serious competitions like the one you just won, Jorge. But it is always exciting for me when sometimes the games will, finals will get a commentary and played online, and I enjoy watching two really great players slog it out to see how they manage to handle their cards and put together a winning combination.
Yeah, precisely. And this has been an exciting feature for me as well. I mean, I have been watching a couple of the YouTube videos of top players handling their cards and turns against each other, and it's an amazing experience especially for experienced Twilight Struggle players to see how other players cope. And I was even thinking of maybe in the future Twilight Struggle tournaments could even be media covered or something. I mean, because the community is growing, there is so much audience possibly that could watch Twilight Struggle. And of course, there are YouTubers and YouTube videos covering some games, especially of the top tournaments. But maybe it could be done in maybe some more professional level in the future. Because if it's not Twilight Struggle, then what would it be? I mean, Twilight Struggle has been the best-selling war game or the best-selling game ever for a lot of years, and it's 20 years old. And I mean, we've got 20 years old Twilight Struggle players. I mean, they are fathers now, and their children have started playing. So I think this would be an awesome community to possibly watch the tournaments. And
for sure.
Now
so national. That's the other thing that's so exciting about it. Obviously, your tournament is testimony to this, but we just have players in literally every corner of the world, and that is so amazing to see.
Yeah, I mean, in the recent convention in Kythera, it was like players from Australia and America and China, and of course all over Europe. Yeah, it was amazing. And of course, if possible, I would like to attend the next ones, wherever it may be. I would like to participate, and I have already heard some beautiful candidates for hosting the next one, and I would be totally in for the next year's one. Now, returning back to Twilight Struggle as a game, we've got the new edition with a new artwork, which is amazing if you ask me. I mean, this has been an amazing work, and the Twilight Struggle is a game that could see this kind of renovation, that's for sure. I mean, the original map of Mark Shimon, it was amazing, but this one is also new and renovated and beautiful, and I think players around the world will love it. Could you tell us a bit more about the new edition? Is there some gameplay changes? Like I saw something like an alternative space race track or something. If, of course, you can share this information.
Yes, of course. So I think as much as I love the original look, I love the original cover, and I love what Mark did, you know, Twilight Struggle serves two purposes. First of all, it covered a topic that had not been well covered in wargaming before, which is how did the Cold War actually happen? Not a hypothetical war between the Soviet Union and the United States. We had lots of those games, but like, how did the Cold War play out? So it's kind of that for wargamers, but for the wargame hobby, it's one of the transition games where we used to lure Euro people over into our
yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, so that's been fantastic for the game. It's been great for GMT sales, but as a result, the artwork is a little dated for, you know, contemporary
standards,
expectations, especially for the Eurogaming crowd, which are used to just outstanding artwork. And GMT has been increasing its own internal expectations for what their products look like, and they've been getting better and better. I think everyone agrees.
I could agree to that, yeah.
So it was time to do the same thing for Twilight Struggle. The cards are also going to be amazing and reworked. That work is underway now, but we haven't seen the previews of that yet. But it'll be fantastic. In terms of gameplay, in addition to collecting all of the kind of one-off cards that have been done in international division or for a localized publication. We are also going to have an alternative start that comes with a number of additional cards. The alternative history start assumes that the plan that was canceled in the very last days of World War II, that the Soviet Union would invade Japan, at least the northern island of Hokkaido. Yeah.
Please tell me there is Operation Unthinkable inside.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's the whole thing. So that obviously that has a bunch of repercussions. If there wouldn't be a Korean War, Korea would probably be entirely in the Eastern Bloc. And then the notion that we kind of went with the cards is the United States goes hard over, reluctantly supporting all the imperialist powers in Asia. So that is the idea of the variant. The United States historically plays kind of a middling role. It encourages the Dutch to leave Indonesia. It encourages the already agreed to liberation of India and Pakistan. But in this scenario, because the Soviets are breathing down Japan's neck, they go the other direction. We're like, oh, nope, we're fighting for the Dutch, we're fighting for the French in Vietnam, and we're going to support the nationalists to the hilt. So that's kind of the scenario we're working with.
I mean, that's awesome. And I was going to ask you in a later point of the interview, of course, but this was a very nice chance to talk about it, that even in the basic game, there could be some variants or cards added. And of course, I have heard other interviews of yours debating that possibly this could mess up the competitive part of the game, and competitive players would mostly be against it. But, since I am a competitive level player myself, and although I do love the original balance of the game as it is, I think there indeed could be some cards added, and they could very well dwell in the realm of alternative history in this case. And this could definitely help the Twilight Struggle map, I mean, certain parts of the Twilight Struggle map see some love, some more love than they used to. I mean, I had particularly Japan in mind when I thought about it. I mean, what if there are conditional events added possibly in late war or in certain turns of the game, that if Soviets control Japan, they get a special card, a one-off card or something or some bonus. And yeah, also some other parts of the map that don't see that much love as the rest of the map. For example, the eastern part of Africa, which kind of plays into the Horn of Africa new version, or possibly if some of the two sides control the battlegrounds of South America and Central America, all of them, I mean, or something. This could be some really nice chances for alternative history cards. Like, what about a Soviet coup in Japan, or so a communist coup in Australia? Who knows? Why not? And I don't know how this would evolve, but yeah, I have been thinking about that as well. And speaking of Horn of Africa, we've got the new variant, which is kind of recent. It was last year, if I'm not mistaken, 2023. Yeah, about 1 year or so. And yeah, it has seen, I mean, much love from the community. And probably these are light gamers or Euro gamers who would like to try the new hobby, I think. So it's been going well, but yeah, to be honest, I don't think this is what dedicated Twilight Struggle players would like to commit into. I have tried this once with a friend, and yeah, okay, it was a fun experience, but okay, this is not the level of game that I would like to invest more games into. But you know what is beautiful is that with its new variant and its new game, you are learning a new part of history that you didn't know. And I was not a Cold War expert myself either. And at some point, I think I intentionally like buying GMT games with regard parts of history that I'm not aware of in order to learn its history. I mean, I learned Cold War through Twilight Struggle. I learned World War I from Paths of Glory. I learned the Vietnam War from Fire in the Lake. And I have learned a lot of interesting parts of history thanks to the games. And yeah, Horn of Africa is no exception. We can learn about a lot of interesting Cold War events focused on Middle East and East Africa. So after that, I think we've got South Asia Monsoon being planned for future release.
Yeah. So everything that I've done so far with the series is to sort of address something that I was upset at the main game with. And in the case of Horn of Africa, it was because I knew that there was an important conflict at the Horn of Africa at the end of the Cold War. We didn't have a card for it. And for COVID happened and whatever, so I was stuck at home. And so instead of just doing a card, I ended up making a small game.
Since
and the
we
other
don't have
thing
a card,
was,
why not making a game instead? Yeah, makes sense.
Exactly.
Why not?
And the other thing is, a lot of Euro gamers especially have bought Twilight Struggle because of its reputation and its rank on Board Game Geek, but then they've never played it. So it sits there dusty on their shelf. And I wanted to give them a way to be introduced to the system without having to commit to 3 hours, and you know how baffling it is to look at a full map of Twilight Struggle if you've never played a game like that and be like, what am I supposed to do and where? The more narrow, shorter focus of Horn of Africa is there to help those players get introduced to the system.
Yeah,
so it was never exactly. So it was never intended really for experienced players like yourself or anybody with any real expertise. But you know, if you want to show somebody how to play Twilight Struggle, it's a faster way to do that than introducing them to the full game. The next game is more like Twilight Struggle for experts. It will be still a shorter game, but it will have more complication rather than less complication, and more things to worry about rather than fewer things to worry about. So it's a 5-turn game. It'll be, you know, an alternative to Twilight Struggle in that sense. It won't necessarily take a full 2 hours or whatever, 2.5, depending on how slow you are. but the intensity will be the same and the variability will be the same and will give you an opportunity to explore a lot of different kinds of strategies.
Yeah, that's my thing for sure. I will definitely try this one. And I take it will be focused on India, Pakistan, and Southeast Asia, possibly as an area of focus geographically.
Exactly. As I said earlier about Horn of Africa, I'm addressing things that aren't quite right in Twilight Struggle. And one of the things that isn't quite right, of course, we introduced the China card. The China card is cute, but it's a kind of a pun, really. The China card is something we say in the United States about passing China back and forth during the Cold War. But it does not reflect China's role in the Cold War that well. And it especially doesn't reflect it when it comes to that triangle between India, Pakistan, and China, because that is a very important dynamic in the Cold War and in that region in particular. And you can't get that flavor out of Twilight Struggle because China is just abstracted by a card that goes back and forth.
Yeah, just too abstract representation. I mean, even a new variant of China Civil War, like a full game, would work if you ask me. And besides South Asia Monsoon, is there possibly some other future plan regarding Twilight Struggle that you would like to share with the viewers, possibly?
So Jason Carr has a game using the Twilight Struggle system that will also be very different, but just focused on the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh,
so that'll begin work after we're done with the anniversary edition in South Asian Monsoon. And Ananda has promised, I sent him a bunch of ideas and card notions to do a Latin American game. So I don't know what his timeline is, but I think that'll be up after the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, Jason, sure, he's got a lot of work to do with all these projects. But yeah, I wish you good luck with whichever project comes after South Asia Monsoon and regarding Twilight Struggle. And besides that, I would like to talk a bit about Imperial Struggle. I mean, how did the whole idea came out? Like, we've got a very successful game, which is Twilight Struggle. And then the next one would be Imperial Struggle, and it features the kind of colonialist powers of the time, which is France and the British Empire. And so how did the idea come to mind? Why did you choose this one, possibly?
Well, very soon after Twilight Struggle was finished, Ananda and I started talking about what a sequel could be. And when you look through the course of human history and are trying to find a rivalry of the scale and scope of the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, there aren't that many options, and Britain and France is kind of the most obvious one.
Yeah, I could agree to that.
The difficulty, of course, with the relationship is it was anything but a Cold War. So it's just like it's not a Cold War in any way, shape, or form. It's just one little war after another, and some of them aren't so little. But so the games, what they have in common is the scale and the timeline and the rivalry. But in terms of gameplay, they don't have that much to do with one another because
I mean, I can think of a bunch of other games that are more similar to Twilight Struggle than Imperial Struggle. It's like, if you ask me, I think for Twilight Struggle lovers, the next step would be possibly Labyrinth: The War on Terror by D.R. Volkov. And of course, Paths of Glory, maybe because it shares the early war and mid-war and the late war. Then it would be Imperial Struggle, possibly. And I don't know, is there any other game that you would like to suggest to Twilight Struggle lovers, like in the next stepping stone after they love Twilight Struggle?
Well, it depends on which direction you want to go. I think there are a lot of good games that have used the Twilight Struggle system now. I personally end up playing more 1960 than I do Twilight Struggle because it's faster. And for Americans, at least, the Kennedy-Nixon race is very familiar. And, so I'm here in DC with a bunch of political people, so they like that idea. I really enjoy, even though I'm not sure about the balance of it, I really enjoy Wir sind das Volk the German design about East and West Germany. I think it's a very interesting, clever application of the Twilight Struggle system, trying to do something that I would never have even thought of trying to model with that game.
Yeah, I would like to try this one too someday. And next one would be a tricky question because you mentioned it yourself before. Like, how much of a war game is Twilight Struggle and Imperial Struggle? I would like to see your answer to that because I have got my own ideas.
I have jokingly said that Twilight Struggle is a war game and Imperial Struggle isn't. But I do think there's certain truth in that because Twilight Struggle, at its core, it's about an area control, struggle over influence and kind of control of a map. Imperial Struggle has elements of this, but the economic part of Imperial Struggle is probably more important than any other component of it. And in that way, it more resembles a Euro game than Twilight Struggle does.
Yeah, I could definitely agree to that. Like, this was the kind of answer that I would mostly expect. And yeah, to be honest, Imperial Struggle is a very good, I think, stepping stone for players mostly focused on Euro games because there's not much, dice rolling and modifiers involved, and it's mostly about managing your resources and tiles to gain area majority around the map and thus score victory points. But by the way, what is amazing is that it features both peace times and war times, and these two alternate. And yeah, it's really exciting to see whether you commit into the war or invest more into peace and economy and even diplomacy, like this beautiful triangle of diplomacy, economy, and war. But anyway, yeah, I would not classify it like that much a hardcore war game. However, as for Twilight Struggle, and while I have heard comments and opinions here and there that it's not strictly a war game, and I have mostly been believing this for a while myself, like it's not strictly a war game in the sense that there is no direct conflict or fighting or combat. However, I was surprised to realize at some point that I grew really strong at Twilight Struggle by applying the concepts of other war games on it. I mean, from Paths of Glory, I learned how important deck culling is, and then from Coin Games, I learned the board stance of action selections and applied it onto Twilight Struggle. And from Empire of the Sun, I learned how to minimize my risks and mitigate the impact of luck and do some safe expansion and some kind of stepping stones to expand my influence all over the map. And in the end, I realized that it might be more of a war game than I would ever have thought, or than what people around the world would have thought, because it features many common aspects with other war games of its kind, though it might not be apparently obvious at the first glance. Anyway, yeah, I think it is a war game, albeit with less conflict than other ones. By the way, I would like to ask you this beautiful question of what is your favorite game right now, not including your designs. If we think about GMT games or other games, war games or not, which would be the game that you would like to set up right now and play it without hesitation?
The game that I'm most impressed with, that I would like to play more, is Land and Freedom. It's a kind of indie publisher here, Blue Panther Games, and it's about the Spanish Civil War. But it's 4 players, and everybody is part of the Republican coalition. So the fascist player is abstracted, and the game is about the frictions between the coalition inside the left in the Spanish Civil War. And I think it's just super clever and crammed with a ton of little historical Easter eggs, but they're effortless because it's not very little rules overhead. So I'm super impressed with that game.
Yeah, and this is something new because most games that I know that are focused on the Spanish Civil War feature both sides. I mean, both the fascists and the coalition. And yeah, this would be a new experience. And this kind of plays into my next question. Like, is there a game that you would like to co-design with someone? I mean, you have the chance to co-design a game with someone, possibly from GMT. You have the chance to design the next coin game series with maybe Volko, or maybe the next part of Live End campaign series. Which one would you be most excited to co-design with someone?
Well, I have proposed something to Mark Herman, and Mark, of course, is the founding father of the card-driven game world, probably the reason that I designed a game myself. I've had the privilege of getting to know him pretty well over the last several years. And so I have an idea for a game that we can do together, and he's pretty excited. The only question is, I'm such a slow designer, will I ever actually get around to it is the hard question. But I have something with him that I'm excited to pursue.
Well, I don't think I can imagine a better combo than you and Mr. Herman. Of course, I mean, his experience is off the charts after so many years and so many designs. And of course, I have played a lot of his games as well, and they are all amazing. And I think, to be honest, that you fit very well with each other, because I take it you are the kind of thematic focused designer, and you've got an awesome amount of thematically focused ideas that you would like to introduce into the game. And then all this combined with the experience of Mark Hermans, I think it will make a beautiful game. And I'm not even asking you what it will be about, because I don't even want to know. I'm sure it will be amazing, whichever the period. And I wish you good luck. And one last comment about that is that it's good to be slow. You know, I'm a slow thinker myself. Like when I want to develop something, I think it over time and do it in a slow manner too. And this helps because you get new ideas along the way, which blend beautifully into the original idea. And then you think about it from a more open-minded perspective. And I think the final result will be even more beautiful when you do it slow than if you do it hastily and under possible deadlines or so.
That's the way it's been so far. And fortunately and unfortunately, I have a real job. So, you know, I have to focus on that to a certain extent. But it also means like I'm not in any hurry about any game design. I can take my time and be happy with what I've finished.
Okay, I'm about the same situation myself. Like it's beautiful when you do it as a hobby. And I mean, if I did this as a first job, maybe it would lose on the fun part. Maybe because your living would depend upon it. Now it's just a hobby and it's beautiful, and it will keep being beautiful. And I mean, there are some questions from friends that I have in mind that I would like to ask you.
Great.
Like, was there any back down when designing Twilight Struggle in terms of cards and events that you would like to introduce, but maybe you decided it's better not to introduce for kind of political reasons or moral reasons or something? Were there any cases of things that you would like to introduce, but they were maybe too unsuitable for politically or morally to introduce into Twilight Struggle?
So as I've said in other forums, the main challenge in designing Twilight Struggle was that there were so many events, so many things that you might focus on. Everything, the whole design process was cutting things out. And as a lot of people know, you know, originally there was a much more robust military system inside Twilight Struggle. And because we were aiming the game at wargamers, what we found is we could not keep them from spending all of their time on military stuff and ignoring what happened in the actual Cold War. So eventually we're just like, well, we have to take it away from them. We have to make them focus. And so that's how the game got to be the way it is.
The problem, yeah.
Exactly. In terms of things that I thought were too political to include, I don't remember ever saying this event is too political or too sensitive, but there have been some times where images were too sensitive.
Yeah.
Like the most famous image of the Vietnam War in the United States, almost certainly, is that poor little girl, running towards the camera. Right. So that was a no. And the most famous, this one happened more recently when I was working on the images for Twilight Struggle Red Sea. The most famous image of the Ethiopian famine it's a poor starving little boy with a distended belly on the ground, and there is literally a vulture standing behind him. And it's just a heartbreaking photo. And even though it is the most famous photo of that famine period in East Africa, it's too cruel, too insensitive, I think, to include it in a game.
Yeah, and
so I've had moments like that.
Of course, this would see a controversial reception. Like, many people would love it for its authenticity, but others would dislike it for its cruelty. So I get it that it's better not to include this one. And okay, before reaching somewhat of a conclusion, I would like to ask you, or rather complain to you about something that I think GMT as a whole, though it's an amazing company with amazing games and productions and, of course, customer service and all of the stuff. I mean, a sector that I would like to see some improving is the rule books, the games rule books, I think. And this could also apply to Twilight Struggle, though, of course, it is a very old game with many reprints and improves. But don't you think that there is a room for improvement in the rule books? I mean, to provide you an idea of what I mean, I'm quite experienced in the teaching GMT games, either live or through tutorials on YouTube. And I mean, the main problem is that GMT rulebooks follow kind of a lawyer's approach. Like, I have a very big experience in interpreting and working with legal texts, but I mean, the structure is the following. First, we read a bunch of definitions for the first page, which make no sense until you learn the rest of the rules, and you are not provided with a general outline of the game. And I mean, especially for light gamers, like new gamers to the hobby, it would help if you could switch to some kind of beginner-friendly approach. Like, you first provide a general idea of the game and the general outline, and then listing the actions and their details, and finally leaving all the exceptions and particular details for the later sections of the rulebooks. And although, of course, I can read the rulebooks very well myself now and understand their logical structure, and they're a very good source of reference if you want to remember some rule or clarify something. You will always find the answer, but I think they could adopt a more beginner-friendly stance. This would be my suggestion, and I don't know if you agree to that. You're free to disagree, of course.
So I think you put your finger on it a moment ago when you talked about GMT rulebooks and their style being good for reference, because that's why they're written the way they're written. Not for their legibility, not for people being able to jump in and enjoy the read of a rule book. It's so that after you've played a game, you can go find the rule quickly, or when you're in the middle of a game, you can go find the rule quickly. And you're obviously right that this style and convention probably makes no sense for games where we're trying to, lure over players from Euro games or other parts of the hobby who just are going to take a look at our rule books and be like, what is this mess? And I know for a fact it's possible to do it the other way, because 1960s rule book is written in a Euro style, and almost all of those rules are in Twilight Struggle, and there are some additional complications in 1960 that aren't in Twilight Struggle. So it was entirely possible to write a rule book in the other direction. What I can say that I think is good is there are folks who are interested in this subject, along with GMT, have been talking about doing a project on that. One thing that made me aware of the problem in particular, Rodney, who does all of those Watch It Played videos, he did 1960, and he's done a couple of them for GMT. When I was talking to him about his process, he was like, well, one thing that I have to do, especially with GMT games, but with any game, but especially with GMT games, is I have to rethink how I'm going to explain the game, because the rulebook order provides no guidance whatsoever for how I should actually teach this game to someone else. And if you just go by the rulebook, you'll leave them in a muddle. And after he said that to me, I was like, yeah, we really need to reorient a bunch of these things. Look, if you're another game in the next war series, just go on and do it. Those guys are war gamers. They all know what they're up to. But if you're trying to do an introductory coin or one of my games or whatever, probably we should reconfigure to a certain extent the way we do rules. I'm not saying you have to get rid of the numbering system, but even just the layout of it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's precisely what I said earlier, that, okay, they are very good for reference, as you pointed out, because the structure is strict and you can find 1, 2, 3, the map, the units, the spaces, and the order and everything. But it doesn't make sense to read it this way when you're a beginner or possibly a non-war gamer or a light gamer. It doesn't really help. And to be honest, I know people, and there are people for a fact that are very interested in the wargaming theme of GMT games, but might be too intimidated of the rulebooks to begin with, and this may be keeping them away from the hobby. And possibly there could be some alternative method of introducing the game to others. And just like Rodney Smith, of course, I had to rethink the way I would present it, be it a coin game or something. I did not follow the sequence of the rulebook, but I did it my own way, and you can call it a Euro-style kind of tutorial or something. But yeah, first you start with a sequence, and then with the actions in and of themselves, one by one. But I watched another interview of yours, and a very nice comment that you made, actually one that was made by Volko Runke, and you told it, is that if you can learn the game from the player aids, then you are in a very good course. And I have to confess that in most cases the player aids are amazing. Like, you can just keep the rulebook on the side and just learn by the player aids and know your stuff, like I'm doing this 1, 2, 3 in small steps.
Exactly. I mean, it was a trick from Volko that after he said it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely stealing that idea. And I've now convinced Fort Circle Games, who I work with, they did Votes for Women and some other card-driven games, kind of light historical games, but he was deadly against player aids. He's like, I'm going to write the perfect rule book, and if you can't get it from the rule book, I'm like, well, you missed the point. I don't need a player aid because the rule book is bad. I need a player aid so I can teach the game. And if we lay out the player aid the right way, it can make teaching the game more or less effortless. I guess the other experiment that we did with this, I saw some player aids for Twilight Struggle, actually, that I quite liked. And when we did TS Red Sea, because we were going to have a smaller map, I tried to actually just put the stuff on the board so that you could, if you understood Twilight Struggle, the player aid that you need is actually on the map and facing both players, so you can run them through the actions just looking at the board without anything else.
Yeah, I mean, for players who are not aware, yeah, this was an amazing kind of innovation that in most games you have a player aid sheet by the side, and in Red Sea you just actually incorporated the steps taken for the actions and whatever the player needs on the map, which was beautiful, I have to admit it. And it's a very good idea for future games, possibly. And of course, there are the technical aspects of needing to spread some player aids here and there, because it's only one rulebook and we've got a bunch of players, so they need the player aids anyway. So why writing a rulebook when you can just spread player aids here and there so that they can learn? Anyways, I hope we have not exhausted you, Mr. Jason, and it has been an amazing talk. And wish you good luck with the next projects, whichever it might be. Looking forward to South Asia and Cuban Missile Crisis, and of course your game with Mark Herman in the future. Good luck with your main job as well, and hope I can see you live in some future convention possibly. I take it you might attend the next convention of 2025 possibly.
I definitely want to be there for the 20th anniversary, and congratulations again on your amazing victory. I look forward to congratulating you in person soon.
Okay, thank you very much once more. Amazing to have been playing a 20-year-old game and becoming so good at that. Okay, so have a good evening, Jason, and good luck. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Thank you. Bye-bye.